Okay, depending on which way you're doing this, if this is just drawn on, then you need to make sure the square that is going over the top of this, that the pewter will be poured into, is drawn round, which is here, and then your image goes in the center. There is an alternative to this, which is using the laser cutter, which will just put the image, obviously, and cut it out quite easily, rather than us having to drill a hole in the middle and cut it out using a coping saw, which is what I will be doing now. Okay, this is the letter cut out using the coping saw, and you can see that it is just in the center here. There's no cuts coming in from the top, there's no cuts coming in from the bottom. Okay, it's just cut out in the center. This is what the laser cutter will do, and it will be a lot more accurate with the laser cutter in use. The next stage within this process is to take one of these pieces of plywood, okay, these squares of plywood that are already pre-cut. Some of them will already have holes drilled in the center. Some of them you will need to customize your piece of ply in order to put the holes where the actual cutout is. So you can see this hole here, when this is put over the top of this shape, is going to go straight in, and the pewter will be able to be poured right into there. Okay, so we take another block of ply, put it on the bottom so the shape fits over it, then we place this block over the top of it. The pewter is going to be poured into there, and it is going to create a much nicer finish than with us using the funnels at the top. You can see here the funnels on this one was previously used, and you would have to cut off this here, and it can be a lot less accurate doing it this way. We're going to have to clamp these together onto the table to enable us to pour the pewter into this really steady. Right, this is the brazing half. Now, in order to start with the brazing half, you have to think about your PPE and the safety around you. So the first thing you need to make sure is you have the leather apron on. Okay, the leather apron, you can't wear your normal workshop apron. The leather apron will absorb anything hot, anything liquidy that goes into it. If this was on your workshop apron, it would just burn straight through it and it would cause harm to you. Okay, you also need to be considering wearing gloves while you're doing this. So these aren't just normal snowy gloves, these are leather gloves. Okay, so leather gloves when you're using this machine. The third thing you need to consider when you're using this is the type of footwear you're wearing. Now, if you've got leather shoes on like that, then you won't need to really use these. However, if you are wearing shoes that have an opening in the top of them, or that don't really cover, probably say up to your ankle, so you're looking at boots probably, then you need to be looking at these and wearing these things here. These are called spats, okay? Now, these go over, or they're just boot coverings. They go over your boot and they cover your boot up. These are made of leather, so again, very similar to this apron. It will absorb anything hot that goes onto it. If you're wearing shoes that aren't leather, that are made up of the horrible kind of plasticky material, then it will just burn straight through. Okay, so you need to make sure you're wearing these over them, and it provides another level of protection. This machine is the brazing half, as I said. This will be melting the pewter. Now, we don't have a cauldron yet. Okay, with the cauldron, we're using a saucepan instead at the moment. So the saucepan will be melting the pewter within it. These are little blocks of pewter. Okay, the pewter comes in blocks like this. Okay, there's enough pewter within that block there to get through probably about 5 students' work, 6 students' work. Okay, so we don't waste the pewter. Okay, the pewter is very expensive. Pewter goes into here and it will melt within about 3 minutes, 4 minutes of having extreme heat placed upon it. Okay, the saucepan goes onto the furnace here. So within these blocks, make sure the handle is facing towards you. You're going to have to pick up the handle obviously and pour it into your work over here. You make sure the gloves are on before you work. Now, this element here, this is your torch, okay? Or as I like to call it, the flamethrower. The torch will have a big flame coming out of it. Okay, that is extremely hot and extremely dangerous. You have to be very careful when you're using this piece of equipment. In order to get this working, we have to turn it on here. Before this machine is turned on, you need to make sure there is nobody in the area around here. Okay, when you're in the workshop, you will see that the area around the braising hearth is ceramic tiles. Okay, you make sure you are the only person within this area when you're doing this. Okay, everybody else stays on the other side of the tiles, okay, within the workshop area. There's only one person allowed within here whilst you're doing this. Allowed within here whilst you're doing this. When you're doing this, you put on your gloves. Put on your gloves and turn on the green button here is your ignition. This lights up this element here, okay? Very similar to a gas stove. When you're lighting up the gas stove, you press the ignition and the gas comes up. Exactly the same principle here. Okay, so press the ignition, lights up, and you can see here, when it comes on, you've got the flame there. Two buttons here, one on the top, one on the bottom. Both of these need to be turned. So you turn it and you point it towards the flame. Bottom one first, and then the top one regulates the pressure within it. You need to make sure it's got a little bit of a flame onto it, but mostly it's blue. You're pointing this down at the pewter. Whilst we're doing this, you'll be able to see the pewter slowly starting to melt. Okay, it's only been on there for a space of two minutes, but you can see the pewter starting to melt already. We now pour the pewter into the hole, so very carefully pouring it in. There we go, so the pewter has gone down there. And now I have, you can see, there, I have scraped away using a ruler just the excess amount of pewter that was on the top there, so it makes it a lot easier for this part here to be taken off. Okay, so we're just waiting, just tap around the sides just to make sure this is all set. You might even be able to hear it a little bit bubbling in the middle of it. But at the moment, it looks as if it is set. So it takes about 2 minutes for it to set. You can see that once the pewter has been taken away from the mould, it comes away quite easily, and then you're left with this piece here. So this is going to be your pewter. Now the only thing that you're going to have to take off now is just hammer through this little part here, which we will do now. So then all you need is just a centre punch and a hammer. And so all we're going to do is to just pop the punch into the middle there and then hammer down. So then after we've done that, we are left with that. We then use a junior hacksaw to just take off this element here, this big rounded cylinder. This is where the pewter was poured into, but this is the only part that needs to be taken off. Okay, so once we've cut through that with just a straight cut, we can then file off and wet and dry this part here so it all becomes smooth. And then you have your letter or your shape, whichever one it is. One thing you have to make sure of before you start taking any cuts from this is that your piece of pewter is securely into the metalwork vise. It is not going to move, but it's not also going to bend. Okay, the last thing you want to do is to take off this part here, and then while you're cutting, your metal is starting to bend. So you need to make sure that this is secure in here and you've got enough weight behind it for you to be able to put the junior hacksaw down and to start. As you can see, this is quite a big and thick piece here. One thing you need to realise is that when you're cutting, you always make sure you don't breathe in any of this area here. Okay, this is what we call the metal swarf. Okay, you need to make sure none of this goes into your eye, so you wear goggles when you're cutting or filing the metal. Okay, because this will always come off. You don't blow this. Okay, some of you might have got into that horrible habit of blowing the sawdust off the desk. Okay, you never blow sawdust, you never blow metal swarf off the desk. This goes into somebody's eyes, goes into somebody's lungs. It can be very harmful for them. Okay, so you need to make sure once you've touched this, you wash your hands at the end of the lesson, but you also wear goggles all the time when filing or cutting the metal. There. You need to make sure the cut is as close to the surface as possible, so then we have a good area for us to file on, so we're not taking too much off it.